Good morning, Malta and Gozo. Welcome to Lovin Daily. July is almost over, the sun's out. We all wish we were at the beach. Sometime in the program you may hear the sounds of Malta through construction. Forgive us for that. Today's episode is brought to you by SMS Mondial, who are launching an exciting new experience for Maltese residents, a so-called Blue Cruise. So essentially, this cruise would be departing from Germany to pick up just Maltese residents for a 5-day experience around the Mediterranean, starting the 29th of August to the 2nd of September. It's absolutely COVID-19 free, with all the crew quarantining for 2 weeks before, with the top chefs, 40% capacity, of course, and you can find out more about this on smsmondial.com.mt. Also, COVID-19 vouchers can be used on these vouchers. What do you think about this cruise?
What's interesting about it is that it's a cruise to nowhere in particular, right? So they're not going to be sailing around the Mediterranean without docking at any ports whatsoever. So you'll get the cruise experience, which is the luxury, the usual luxury of a cruise and the relaxation of it, without the risks that we experienced in the past few months. With regards COVID. So this could be a way of people to still enjoy a cruise while the pandemic is ongoing. I think it's quite interesting.
For sure. Shall we start with today's headlines?
Let's go.
So, Adrian Delia hints at a third confidence vote as PN hit by another BLEAK survey. Malta is unhopeful on a deal on EU COVID-19 recovery plan and whether it will be reached. A metal singer has quit her band after experiencing sexism and abuse. Labour's new deputy leader insists that party media has a future in Malta. And lastly, a Maltese photographer snaps ex-couples in places they first met. Super interesting stories today.
Yes. So let's begin. The drama that has engulfed the Nationalist Party in recent weeks is showing no signs of abating. In fact, it seems to be coming to a head. So yesterday, Adrian Delia gave a couple of interviews where he suggested that there's going to be a meeting of the Executive Council next week, and he suggested that he's open to calling a third confidence vote in himself, this time at the General Council. And for the first time ever, he's given a clear indication that if he does lose this vote, he will resign as leader. However, he said that if he ends up winning this vote, which, to remind people who may be unfamiliar with the terminology, the General Council is composed of the party's councillors. If he wins this vote, he said everyone must step in line or else leave the party if they don't agree with him. There was a survey published yesterday by Malta Today, which once again painted a very bleak picture for the opposition. It basically said that compared to the Prime Minister, Adrian Delia is only trusted by 13% of the public, 13%, an absolutely abysmal figure for any opposition leader of a democratic country.
Indeed. I mean, you have 13% confidence vote, you've been voted, you've lost the confidence vote twice by your own party. How do you expect to lead the Nationalist Party into government, if you can't even decide on your own party leader? Yeah. To me personally, Delia just feels like, that guest that you have over at the party who's just not taking the hints to leave. He's on your sofa, he's drinking your good whiskey, and yet not taking your hints. And to be honest, from the other side, this is kind of Labour's dream, and we eventually are going to turn into a one-party state at this rate, which is not a democratic thing at all.
Just one more thing. The survey also gauged the initial popularity of Therese Comodini Kakia, who seems to be the person who has been chosen as Delia's replacement, at least by the majority of his MPs. And it's not good news for her either, to be fair. It only, she gained, compared to the Prime Minister, she's trusted again by 13% of the people, so very identical figures to the current leader. However, we must bear in mind that she isn't the leader. Her name wasn't even brought up as a potential leader until very, very, very recently, and yet she has already reached Delia's numbers. So whereas Delia has been there for 3 years, and his numbers are that low. So not good news for him at all, especially in this current climate of crisis.
And there's said to be another vote, no, this Thursday?
There's potentially another vote this Thursday. We're going to have to wait and see, but obviously follow lovinmalta.com for more updates on this situation. Moving on, Sam.
Indeed. So in more external affairs in Brussels, the unprecedented COVID-19 EU fund is in the talks right now with Prime Minister Roberto Bella in Brussels. The figure for this EU fund for recovery is hovering around 750 billion, but the kind of fine print is still being ironed out. Of course, as usual with pressing issues in the EU, there's divisions between North, South, East and West. We have the usual frugal four, which are Netherlands, Austria, Sweden and Denmark, feeling a bit conservative as to how much money should be spent in this recovery fund, and in particular the Netherlands pointing out that those who don't comply with the rule of law should receive less funds or even be left out of potential funding. I think the most pressing issue right now being discussed is this the non-repayable grants, which would be part of this recovery fund. So the figure is hovering around 350 billion, which is what was proposed by the Frugal Four, versus the 500 billion proposed by the EU Commission and the Franco-German so-called regime. So, I mean, this is a super pressing issue. I mean, this is going to affect generations to come, unprecedentedly. We have never faced a pandemic or a health crisis on this scale in the century, so all eyes are on Brussels now, essentially, to see what happens.
I think what's also interesting is to understand Malta's position in all of this. And the Prime Minister said that Malta is, during these talks, it's kind of being punished for its own success. So basically that we're going to be getting less money for the simple reason that our economy was doing well before the pandemic and did better than most throughout the pandemic. Therefore, we don't need as much money as the others do in that sense. However, he's saying that's unfair, which is a fair point. Saying it's unfair that we're basically getting punished for doing our jobs well. However, one also needs to understand the other point of view, which is that at the end of the day, the money is coming from somewhere. It's coming from other countries, and no one is going to just give away millions and billions of euro with no terms attached. I think this is this is really what the European Union is about. Some people seem to think it's a dictatorship from above. It's not the case. It's a group of member states, usually with very, very diverging opinions, and it's very difficult to reach consensus sometimes. So moving on.
There was more local news, indeed.
Yes, Michaela, right?
Michaela, was it Michaela? I'm not sure. I don't know. Anyways, Michaela has disassociated herself from her metal band Martyrium. All these words, I can't pronounce them today. So essentially, she's a metal singer, one of the few female-fronted metal bands in Malta. She has completely disassociated herself from them. She quoted disrespect as a musician and a woman. She has posed allegations of racism with band members. She described it as being a complete dictatorship, objectification, and she also took the time to announce her new solo album. Now, personally, as a musician in Malta, I mean, I can relate to being a woman in a male-dominated industry. Personally, I've never experienced blatant sexism like this, but I think it's very brave for her, to speak out in such a small scene as well. And I'm sure that no one's going to forget, these allegations.
Yes, again, I agree. Very brave to speak out about about people who must have been her friends once and her former colleagues, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about this in the future. But yes, very, very brave of Michaela to speak out about an issue as serious as this. Moving on, Daniel McAuliffe, Sorry about that, there's a bit of noise in the background. Daniel McAuliffe, the new incoming deputy leader of the Labour Party, has said that he intends to keep One TV and One News and party media, and he said that there's still a place for such media outlets in the democratic society. His point was one of pluralism, that you know when you're watching One, you know what you're going to get. You know it's owned by the Labour Party. You know you're getting basically propaganda when you're watching their shows. However, he also made an interesting point, which is that some of the attacks can be less fierce, so he's going to review some, to make some of their shows. He also said that he wants the Labour Party to become a bit more independent from the government, which is a good thing. That shouldn't just reflect whatever the government wants, but it should even act as checks and balances for the government as well, presumably because the opposition is incapable of doing so right now, so it has to come from within their own party.
I appreciate his honesty about it being propaganda, but the problem with that argument is that people who watch One and people who watch Net only watch One or only watch Net, so you're not getting the other side. And I don't agree that this is part of media pluralism. I think that what you need is very independent media, a strong and diverse kind of media ownership in that sense, but if you have, especially in a small country like Malta, which is so polarized on all these issues, and especially have such strong feelings towards their own parties, I mean that it's just setting up for failure, and it's just reinforcing this idea that we're never going to get past our partisan mentality. And I believe that dismantling the TV stations and the radio stations and the newspapers,
dismantling them.
Yes, dismantling them. I think that would be the step forward for a more democratic nation, and one where the mentality isn't, as long as my party is in power, then corruption is fine, which I feel is very blatant nowadays.
Yes, let's remember that the Nationalist Party does want to dismantle them for financial reasons specifically. They're a strain on political parties, especially in this day and age. However, it has to be, obviously, there has to be a consensus reached. You can't dismantle one and not the other, because otherwise there'll be an absolute imbalance.
And I mean, that's kind of blatant in itself, no? I mean,
and it also
they haven't filed their audit in so long.
Yes, that's another one, and that's another thing that Daniel McAuliffe said he promises to do, that he promises to sort out this issue of their audited accounts. But in terms of party media, yeah, I mean, I think you make a fair point over there.
Thank you.
So, our final story, something a little bit different. A Maltese photographer, Justina Lul, has presented a pretty quirky project involving, which basically got ex-couples to stand next to each other in the places where they had their first date or where they first met up. And you see like a bunch of different kinds of couples, straight, gay, lesbian, standing next to each other, and they almost look like couples, only they would have broken up a while ago.
I believe she also had some actual couples pose for the exhibition as well, and asked guests to see if they could decipher which couples were real and which were, not couples anymore. I think it's pretty cool, especially for Malta, again, being such a small country. Probably the guests were the friends of the couples at the exhibition, and I think it's pushing forward Malta's documentary, photography, and I'm excited to see what Justine comes up with next.
Absolutely. And that's
Shall we wrap it up?
Let's wrap it up.
So this was Lovin Daily. Once again, this has been brought to you by SMS Mondial. You can check out all the information about the Blue Cruise on smsmondial.com.mt. I was your host, Sam Vassallo, joined today with Lovin Malta's editor, Tim Diacono, and have a full day of Lovin.